Welcome to the Reprofiles, where infertility meets injustice and nothing is off limits.
We're two nurses. We're certified reproductive health advocates, and we're here to tell you everything they didn't.
From the broken systems to the heartbreak left behind, we're here to connect the facts, the policies, and the pain.
Because silence isn't safety, and we're done being quiet.
This is the Reprofiles.
Infertility, injustice, and all things nobody warned you about.
Welcome back. It's episode 3 of the Reprofiles, and we're totally doing this. We're talking about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and... Oh, wait. I'm probably not allowed to sing that, right? Do you think Salt and Pepper's going to sue me?
Please stop. Yes, we cannot afford a lawsuit this early in our podcast career.
We most definitely cannot. Fair, please. But I do admit it. Everyone listening now has probably got that song stuck in their head. That's exactly why we're here today, right? To get people thinking about sex.
Yeah, today we're going to talk about the sex word.
Oh my gosh. What did you say?
It's so hard to say that out loud.
I know. Why is that? I don't get it.
I don't
How did you
know.
first learn about sex?
Picture it. Jacksonville, 1985. Boys in one classroom, girls in another. A nun teaching the girls and a science teacher teaching the boys. Yeah, it was Catholic school. So how do you think that went?
I imagine that was some combination of awkward silence and probably some bad science. Probably some mixture of that.
Yeah, let's just leave it at that. But when I had that class, here's the kicker. I actually started my period the year before I had sex ed, which was 5th grade. I actually started my period when I was 9 years old. So 4th grade. So that was no picnic. It was not cool. It wasn't awesome. I don't know how my mom knew. I guess because, I started showing signs of puberty, but she knew to give me the period talk just in time because I felt like she gave me the talk. We took a walk around the neighborhood, and that's when she told me about the period. And then it happened. It just happened, like, very shortly thereafter.
That's a bit surprising, right? You're like, "Did you know?"
I know. I was like, okay. But I remember thinking, like, this is it. This is what all that secrecy is about. Because, I have an older sister and I had seen like period products, but I was always like, what is that? And I was just unimpressed with the whole process, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, at least you had Margaret Simon in your corner, but,
Yes.
I agree. It was also kind of anticlimactic. I was sort of like, "Oh, this is what all the fuss is about." And for me, the learning process of it all, there was some component of it at school. I can remember at that time, maybe 5th grade, so I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and there was a period of time where we had like modular buildings, like basically like double wide trailers
Right.
that
Yeah.
they would hold class in because the school itself was some years wasn't big enough to house all the students. So I remember it happening outside in that building. And you sparked when you just said that they split you guys up. You sparked my memory because I seem to recall that as well. That they like said all the boys go in that one, all the girls go in that one, right? But for me, it was probably less of actual any education and more just maybe piecing together bits and pieces from that health class, but friends and also, let's be honest, probably like TV shows.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Because I mean, we put a lot of things together from childhood through what we saw on TV, right? Our kids
And
are actually very lucky because I think we're such more, I won't say attentive, but we're just a little bit more, I don't know. We just give our kids a little bit more information. I feel like, at least I try to. Maybe that's just because I didn't get it all the time, but I
yeah.
try to give my kids as much information as I can so they can make good choices. But when we were growing up, it was like, yeah, go watch some TV and figure it out.
Yeah, or movies. And back then, it was very like risque back then. Like a PG-13 movie back then would be probably rated R right now.
Isn't that funny? That's so true, though. I just had that epiphany the other day. I was watching a show and I like looked to see what the rating was. And I'm like, what? Because, yeah, when we were in school, PG was like,
Yeah.
PG? You saw a PG movie, AnnMarie? Oh my gosh.
So
So,
special.
anyway, yeah. But we definitely were learning a lot more about topics like that from TV than we were from adults.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think that's kind of the problem, right? Is that We're not
Abs
getting where we're just getting, like, health. This is what the uterus is, and this is what the ovaries are, but then that was it,
there's, like,
and
no connection to the
yeah,
actual everyday, what do these organs do? What do they mean? How do they work?
exactly.
Right? I mean, even today, teachers as we were doing research for this episode, I have a good friend who is a former teacher. She works for a publishing company now, I believe, like a textbook publishing company, but she was kind enough to survey some of her teacher friends, and it was somewhat comical as the texts were coming back because she was just like, one of the teachers said, "We wouldn't touch that topic with a 10-foot pole." And then another teacher said, "Well, criticizing curriculum in this political climate could cost you your job." So I thought that was very interesting sort of like dichotomy between I ain't talking about that for
Mhm.
probably embarrassment reasons, and then, oh my, like maybe I can't even talk about it in real terms because I
'Cause
might lose my job. And that's
then you
the
might get
much
fired. Exactly, and that's the fear. It's like, you know and it's also that sex has been it's a politics issue now. It's not so much, "Oh, it's education, it's health education." It's not, it's political. For some, sex is just framed as something to be avoided, a danger,
yes.
and that's like those people that are like abstinence-only camp, and that's the only way to do it. It
Yeah, I mean, on the other end, you've got, risk reduction, like teaching abstinence and, contraception, STD prevention. However, if you talk about the political climate having an impact on it, those things are becoming much more taboo to talk about again. Things like birth control, especially as we watch the government destroy $10 million worth of birth control at a cost of $200,000 when various world governments had expressed that they would be willing to purchase said birth control from us. Instead, we destroyed it, right? So
Yeah.
now there's this, as you mentioned, this whole politicized factor of how do we talk about it and do it in the right way without getting in trouble or what have you.
Yeah, there's this field of holistic sex ed. It's more of like a developmentally appropriate, lifelong learning. Particularly in the European nations like the World Health Organization and European models, they actually start talking about body awareness in early childhood. It's not damaging them and it's not sexualizing children. It's
True.
just they're learning about their bodies and about another system of the body. We learn about cardiac, we learn about
That's
nervous
right.
system and all of that, and it's just another system we need to know. It's that early awareness that kids need to know. They don't know proper terms. It's not
Unless we teach them to them, right?
exactly, and it's not like that one-time awkward birds and bees talk that you get
No.
in middle school or with your parents, and they're, like, super embarrassed, and it's just like, "This is how it works, okay, bye."
Yeah,
You
let's
know?
never talk about it again.
Yeah.
Right? But see, that's how you end up, that's that sort of abstinence only camp, and
Mhm.
that's how I think some unplanned pregnancies do happen because, like, we don't touch the topic with a 10-foot pole or whatever until it becomes a problem, I guess you could say. But kids are curious, and kids ask where babies come from, and we're the ones who panic, not them.
Yeah,
It's
no.
our own, I think, discomfort with the thought of having to talk about it that
Mhm.
it, perpetuates the taboo such
Yeah.
that right? It's again, our kids aren't the ones that are panicking. We're the ones that are panicking, and if we just talked about it in the same way as you mentioned, you talk about the cardiac system or another body system, I feel like we'd be setting kids up for a much better sense of body awareness.
Yeah, yeah, and, kids don't come into this world ashamed of their bodies. We kinda teach them that not so much like we say, like, "Oh, you should be ashamed of," but it's in the not saying of things
Yeah.
is, like, if we don't talk about it, we something to be hidden, and those types of things, and that's a strong message. Not talking about it is a strong message.
Yes, what you don't say is saying something.
Mhm.
And you are right. We, um, you know, do teach our children to be ashamed of their bodies. We have an obligation to look at, if we look back, messaging has always shifted a bit with the times, right? In the 50s, the 60s, sex ed when it existed was all about unwed mothers, unwed pregnancies, putting responsibility on girls, right? Like this is your job to avoid and it's your problem if it happens,
Yeah.
right?
I always
And
think of, like, Grease and, like, Rizzo's got a bun in the oven.
I can't believe I'm talking about this on this podcast, but I may or may not have played one of the Pink Ladies in a Dover High School late 1990s production of Grease, where I was
We gotta find that tape.
Frenchie. I was Frenchie. You know you want
Nice.
pictures of that on a future show. I will have to see if I can find them.
Beauty School
Um,
Dropout?
Beauty School Dropout. I think you meant Beauty School Dropout. Anyway, but anyway,
We're gonna
so
get
like I
sued
said,
again, stop singing.
I'm singing again, I'm getting sued again. Right? 50s, 60s, sex ed was all about unwed pregnancies and, putting the onus on the girl. And then
Then
came
the pill,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
The
then
pill
it came
came next, and it's still framed as a women's responsibility. We have to take the pill, and we have to do it every day, and all of that. So it's kind of like, yes, it was a freedom, but it was also, again, our responsibility to handle,
all things
all
related
those.
to it.
Yeah.
All things, right?
Yeah.
Because I think too, like, a lot of women are not aware of the fact that birth control has risks.
Mhm.
Right? It's so
Yeah.
folks don't, the average person doesn't really know that in infertility medicine, we use birth control a lot, which
Yes.
seems like, why are you doing that? You do know I want to get pregnant,
Yeah.
right? Like I have patients over the years that would be like, Nurse Elizabeth, like, you know we want to get pregnant, right? Like, why are you giving me birth control, right? So birth control has purposes other than just the as you mentioned, that thing that we were taught where it was our responsibility and you can't mess it up and et cetera, right? Well, then 1973 brings Roe v. Wade, right? Well, now sex ed is all kinds of tangled up with a bunch of abortion politics.
Mhm. And not only that, but then, like, I know we're kinda doing this decades, but going into the '80s, we had the whole HIV/AIDS crisis that framed everything, and I remember going through that. I remember reading about it. My parents subscribed to Time magazine, so I remember reading all about that, and that was hard to go through, and now I look back on it, and it's just like, wow, that was kind of crazy, and how there were people that were scapegoated in that crisis. But then moving forward, in the '90s and early 2000s, brought about all of these abstinence-only programs, which were, heavily funded by the conservative politics. Should be afraid of sex. You should be afraid of all of this. You're either gonna get this horrible, horrible, horrible STD, or you're gonna get pregnant.
This bad thing or that bad thing, your
Ye
choice, right? I mean, and the research is pretty clear when we talk about the whole abstinence only mentality. The research actually is extremely clear that an abstinence only technique, if you will, might only delay that first intercourse experience, right? A little. But unfortunately, I think it leaves young people without the knowledge that they need to take care of their bodies properly, right? This is crude, but we've got a lot of folks on the other side of this discussion who will say things like they need to keep their legs closed and things like that. And that's just so like, again, we have left our young people without some critical knowledge that they need, right? And swinging around for a half a second over back to fertility, it's fascinating. I had a woman once who was 53 years old. This woman was the peak of physical condition. She was a professional athlete of some kind. I don't remember what kind, but she was completely astonished when I told her that her ovaries and her eggs were like not here for it anymore. She's like, I
Yeah.
don't understand. I'm healthy. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I exercise. What do you mean? Right. But we didn't arm her with
Mhm.
the appropriate information, right? We didn't trust her as we don't trust kids to take this information in as they would any other subject, right? So we leave young people without the knowledge that they need. And in a 2001 study, even found teens who took these so-called virginity pledges had the same STD rates as kids who didn't. Can you
That's
believe
interesting.
that?
Yeah.
I really can actually.
Yeah. I mean, I can see it, but it's interesting. Just as, like, just shows like shame, scare techniques, they don't work. They never have,
No,
you know.
absolutely, they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if we bring ourselves to somewhat modern day, sex education is actually mandated in 30 plus states, I think close to 40 states. there is some mandated version of sex ed, but you're giggling, right? Because you're joining us from the great state of Florida, and I am joining us from the great state of Arizona. And so, whilst sex ed is mandated in different states, as women, we are well aware of the fact that our rights vary by the state we're in.
Mhm.
So, what is taught is widely variable, right?
God, yeah. Like, some kids get that inclusive, comprehensive sex ed, and others, they barely learn how reproduction works. And in my experience, both, in the fertility world and in GYN world, there are lots of women who have no idea how the reproductive system works, or they are getting their information on the internet.
The dark holes of the internet come all of the wild theories that Nurse Anne-Marie, is it okay if blank or the internet said blank? Yeah, so at the end of the day, you're right. And that's the wild part is I think fewer than half of teens actually report learning about birth control before their first sexual encounter because there again, where it's this thing not to be touched, not to be talked about.
Mhm.
And as a result, not only are we maybe delaying sex by a very short period of time, but we're not really doing anything with preventing disease. None of the things that they said that all of these restrictions would sort of be for, we don't really see that in real life, right?
No.
And if fewer than half of teens are reporting that they didn't learn about birth control before their first sexual encounter, which means by the time it's relevant, it's already too late. Like, how do we miss that boat?
Yeah, way too late, way too late. And, they substituted again going on the internet or going on TikTok and Snapchat and friends and, talking about it at school. I mean, sure, we did that when we were kids. Every generation has done that. They talk about it at school with their friends or, they learn about it in movies like we were talking about earlier or on the internet. It's not a lot of times, as we know, there is a lot of not true stuff on the internet. Can you believe that? There's, like, the internet isn't
Wait
real,
a
like,
second.
sometimes.
I thought everything on the internet was real.
It's
That's not
not.
true?
I'm so sorry to break that to you, but it is not!
How about that? Well, I mean, can you imagine if we had tried to learn I can't even imagine actually trying to have learned sex ed through TikTok trends,
Yeah.
but I think it maybe would have been better than the hit and miss, everybody's so embarrassed to talk about it. I mean, I'm not sure which one is worse, but
Yeah, I mean, here's a life hack to avoid pregnancy. Just drink some Mountain Dew. Do the do.
exactly. That's it, but that's not education, but it's kind of where we are in that we see a lot of these sort of failures of our inability to just be mature about it lead to a lot of shame and a lot of silence and kids, you see a lot of things that go down with abuse and things like that where kids if they had been given the appropriate understanding of their bodies, right? We talked about that body awareness at a young age and permission to speak up and speak out if and when anyone ever violates their personal space, right? So
Mhm.
I've taught my kids, always taught my kids their idea of their personal space, their personal boundaries. I've always told my kids, when they were younger, mommy and daddy are allowed to see you in the bathroom or help you get a bath. Just you have to give kids the right boundaries.
Mhm.
And I think that I really do wonder how much our inability to really just talk about it in a reasonable, just very factually based way, if we could get there, how much maybe we could impact things like kids who, are victims of abuse and they don't even really know it because we
Yeah.
haven't taught them about their body and what it's there for and that it's theirs to protect.
Yeah, and just going back to what you were saying just a minute ago was, forcing kids to give your uncle a hug or give them a kiss goodbye or whatever. If a child is not comfortable doing that, you have to respect that.
Yeah,
And it's not because, that's rude. It's not rude. It's their comfort level. And
that's right.
if you force them to do that, they're giving up their comfort level. And therefore, when they get older, and if things were happening, they were like, well, I can't say no because
Right.
I was taught to be good girl or I was taught to be, I want to be polite. So, but, where that boundary is. And I think that that in the beginning, when they're younger, if they're not comfortable with it, don't make them do it. People, if I meet people and their children and they go, "Oh, give Miss AnnMarie a hug," I'm like, "It's okay. We can do a fist pump, a high five." If they're not even comfortable with that, I'm okay with it. Let them
Absolutely.
be comfortable. But, this is where kids know when the subject is off limits. They know. And when the parents shut down those questions, kids hear in their mind that this is shameful and this is something we don't
Yeah.
talk about at
Yep.
all.
You're absolutely right, because when that question gets shut down, right, there's an instant
Mhm.
sense of shame on the
Mhm.
behalf of the child asking the question, and
Mhm.
then silence has consequences. So, knowing that 93% of child sexual abuse is at the hands of someone they know,
Mhm.
right? And so without arming our kids with language, right? The ways of saying, this is my body, this is my space, these are my boundaries, without arming them with that language or the confidence of being able to say, this is my body, these are my boundaries. Kids can't ask for help. And that is, what I was mentioning earlier, it feels like we have perpetuated this environment in which these things go on because we haven't given just an appropriate space.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, without any confidence, kids can't ask for that help.
Right. They, like going back to what you're saying, the someone that they know, it's always was a stranger danger, right? When I was growing up, it was all about stranger danger. It was all about like don't talk to any strangers. And a lot of times it is not the stranger. Like majority, like you were saying, majority of the time it is not the stranger. It is someone that they know, family, friend, something like that. And that is scary. And that's awful. But going back to abstinence only curriculums, they kinda double down on that shame, especially
They
for the
do.
girls, especially for women and girls and growing up.
Yep. No, it's absolutely right. And if you tell kids that sex equals danger and shame, right?
Mhm.
That's what you lead with. What impact do we think that has on them later in life when they're adults,
Yeah.
right? I mean, in healthcare settings, fertility treatment settings, right?
Mhm.
We see those kinds of consequences in our work all the time. I mean, I had patients that were victims of sexual abuse who were very traumatized by
Mhm.
internal ultrasounds that we often use for fertility monitoring. It was extremely traumatic to have to endure that in the clinic setting, right? So that's in a healthcare setting that because we shut you down, we led with shame and fear and danger. Now, as an adult, this is still impacting you when you're trying to get healthcare
Mhm.
or you're trying to have a relationship with a partner. And
Yeah.
I really wonder how much more probably prevalent that is behind a lot of some of the misconceptions, or I don't know what you wanna call it, but just sort of like the misnomers or the disinformation, if you will, around things like sex and periods and birth control and all of the things, right? There again, we are in such a politicized time that, but in any case, we see those consequences in our work every day for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it not only is it, learning sex ed and learning that, but it goes into our world of fertility. How many times have you heard, "I don't want anybody in my family to know about this.
Yeah.
I don't want any of my friends to know I'm going for this." And, the stats are 1 in 6, right? 1 in 6 are going through infertility struggles. But here we are, they're afraid to talk about it. They don't want anybody in their family to know. But why? Why? Because they're
Right.
shame because we put that shame on, like as a society, not us, but as a society, we
Absolutely.
are like, "Oh my gosh, why don't you have kids? And what's wrong with you?" And the very first thing after you get married is, "When are you
When
gonna
are you
have a baby?"
having kids? Yeah,
Yeah,
when are you
when are
having
you having
babies?
kids?
Exactly.
And so it just compounds
So,
all of
yeah,
that.
so we have no problem being pushy and getting all up in your
Mhm,
business and asking when you're having babies,
mhm,
right? But
yeah,
we don't wanna help that be a healthy experience, and because it's been so taboo, and I mean, I would say that in the last 5 plus years, I've really been very pleased to see how much support has popped up and how much folks going through fertility treatment are feeling more empowered to share their story and to to break the barriers down for other people,
Yes.
right? Because when they feel included, what we talked about, there's this shame around doing IVF. I mean, I know that I didn't share with some of my family members that we were doing IVF because I knew that they had a very religious type of I guess, an opinion of it or something like that. And
Mhm.
but again, you live, so now we're asking somebody who we were all when we were growing up and we thought about if we thought about having kids, usually a fertility clinic isn't ever a part of that thought process. And yeah. And so and then don't I mean, then you've got all kinds of issues surrounding inclusion and that sort of thing, right? I mean, we
Well,
see
yeah.
that as well.
Girl, I live in the state of don't say gay, you know? That's where I live that. I mean, teachers are really scared to acknowledge it. I mean, both my kids are done with high school now, but they, going into high school over the years, the teachers would have like the little flags on their door, safe space, to
Mhm.
come in. The whole name thing got a little out of hand. I actually I forget which year, it was probably like 3 years now. I had every single school year, I would get a paper I would have to fill out to allow the teacher to call my daughter by her nickname. Just a nickname. Like, let's say, like, if you had a child named Michael and they go by Mike, you would have to literally, as a parent, fill out the form and saying it's okay for the teacher to call them Mike. And this all comes from this. This all comes from the inclusion and from the LGBT community and changing names. And you know what? Sometimes kids just want to experiment a little bit. And it's not all about like, oh, they're gonna give them hormones. That's not it. It's let them experiment a little bit with their identity. And if
Indeed. Yeah,
changing their name is is something, then let them do it. You know what?
sure.
They can always change it back. It's not like, you know, it's a
Absolutely.
private
And
thing.
I
You
mean,
can change it.
let's give kids a little bit more respect, right? Like 12-year-old
Yes.
old kid is not a 6-year-old kid,
No.
right? So if a 12-year-old kid is their name is Logan and they want to go by Logie,
Yeah.
like why do you need my signature after that?
Yeah.
If
Parental
somebody
rights.
wants to be called something specific, why would we need to give parental permission for something like that, right? I mean, we've even seen in the realm of this topic, we've seen conservative groups calling teachers like groomers
Yeah.
even for teaching
Yeah.
anything that falls outside of heteronormative sort of scripting, right?
Mhm.
When we know that you don't make someone gay, you don't make someone ungay, like that's not how it works at all.
That's not how any of this works.
And yet, remember we saw that teacher, I wanna say, like, maybe Idaho, somewhere in the I wanna say maybe Northwest, who was penalized a number maybe a year ago or so. I don't remember, time is elusive like that, but there was a teacher that had a sign up in her classroom that said something on the lines of, "All kids are welcome here," and it was like white hands,
Yeah.
brown hands, black hands, rainbow hands, all the hands. We're all welcome here, right? And somehow that became controversial, right? That had to come down, right? So we're just erasing this stuff, first of all, by again going super hardcore and
Mhm.
labeling teachers who just want to share that these are here's how it works, right? Like there are gay people. So just because you don't like it doesn't make it not exist.
It exists.
Right,
Yes.
and it's certainly just because you doesn't like it, just because you don't like it, um, again, yeah, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist because the it there is the person. As you were mentioning, those don't say gay laws, they put teachers at risk for even acknowledging that
Yeah.
LGBTQ students
Yeah.
exist, right?
Absolutely.
Teachers who teach anything outside of heteronormative, right, are groomers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep,
But here's my issue with that is it's not like even in heteronormative, sex ed is not about, hey, this is how you have sex. This is what happens. And
it's
you know, it
not.
it's not that at all. So
It's the
why
biology of it all,
yeah,
right? Like, we'll let you figure that other part out. We do think that most consenting folks can figure that part out. We're
yeah,
just talking about the biology part. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you for bringing that up because that is the kind of bizarre, but let's say the quiet part out loud parts.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of, in the state of Florida, and, I'm very involved in what happens in my state and locally, so it's very important to me, and that's why I'm very attuned to what's going on. But with the drag show ban in the state of Florida, like, my daughter couldn't go until she was 18 years old, but here's the thing, I could take her to a rated R film and watch, sex acts in a rated R film with naked people, and but I can't take her to a drag show and then where they tell, like, some naughty jokes. Are you like, is what? I feel safer at a drag show than I would going to, have her. I'm trying to think of, like, a big controversial film of, like, filled with
Sure.
sex, but,
Yeah,
you
but
know
there's some really raunchy movie, right? And there's that part where you're like, "No, I do not need to sign a permission slip if she wants to go by a different name.
Yeah,
I do, however, need to sign a permission slip if" right? And so it's like these online spaces too being like complete breeding grounds for toxic subculture and you have all
yeah.
this, I don't know, depravity or something like that. And yeah, we do. I mean, we very much just tabooify it all.
Mhm.
And without healthy, inclusive education, kids are going to inevitably, and kids do inevitably, fill the gaps with whatever they find on the Reddit
Yep,
threads and
yep.
whatever influencers are out there pushing misogyny, right?
Or
So we want to, instead of taking control of it and just teaching our kids the facts, we want to let them
Mhm.
go out and learn it from Reddit. I don't think so.
Some person out there. I mean, and this includes book bans too, right? Characters that are LGBT that have those identities, they're being erased from libraries. So, I think, like, if I was in high school, middle school, whatever, and the only thing I'm reading about is just, again, heteronormative, but that's not me. That's, if
Yeah.
I was part of the LGBT community, that's not me. And where am I going to learn about people like me? And then, like you said, they're going to go on the dark web, or they're going to find it in Reddit threads, and they're going to find, these people, and it's not healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's how this type of culture perpetuates itself
Mhm. Yeah.
because, at the end of the day, you got silence in schools becomes violence in society.
Yeah. And
I
the
mean,
whole
point
rape
blank.
culture. I mean, that's it's rape culture, right? If
Yeah.
you don't
And it's
teach.
on us. It's on us to defend
Yeah.
ourselves against it. We're probably at fault if it happens. You may or may
Mhm.
not even believe me, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look at, I was at a protest this morning for a community college professor who is being allowed to stay on the payroll after countless claims and accounts of misconduct, of sexually assaulting students, of forcing students to go into a different room and have private kissing lessons. Like silence in schools becomes violence in society, my friends, right?
Yeah.
Because we taught those kids to be quiet. I mean, I mentioned to a number of the students at today's protest, I said, "I am so proud of your bravery
Mhm.
because when you and I, Anne-Marie, you and I were growing up, we would have been told, don't say anything, don't, right? Like, shh,
Yeah.
your skirt must have been too short,
Yeah.
or
Why
you must
why
have
were
been
you
too,
wearing that? Yeah.
you must have been too pretty. Totally your fault, right? But all of that silence is what breeds violence in society. So, what does work? Is it, I think, when you look at something like Planned Parenthood's peer educator programs, right? Those are a great example. It makes me crazy when folks are, want to be all political about Planned Parenthood. And I'm like, you do know that the name is Planned Parenthood. Okay.
Yeah.
An abortion is not a way of having a planned parenthood, though sometimes it does come into play, but we teach safe birth control with some form of contraception or some sort of barrier contraception, right? We teach these things. The Planned Parenthood peer educator does stuff like that, right? So that's an
Absolutely.
amazing example of just like, let's call it what it is.
They also teach consent. Like, what is consent, and how to give consent, and how to get consent. And I think that is a big issue, is
Absolutely.
learning to give consent, learning to get consent. The
Yeah,
whole he
and
said,
what does
she
that, yeah,
said.
what does that
Yeah.
mean? Yeah, if we're so embarrassed as the parents in this scenario, right? We're so embarrassed to teach our children about their bodies, then how embarrassing must it be for them to try to navigate that
Mhm.
journey? And it's so interesting, right? Because like we even are like when our parents get older, like, ew, our parents still have sex, right? Like
Oh, gross. Ew.
but again, we just constantly made it this like thing that is so taboo that, but what does work is talking about it.
Yep.
That's what does work. That's
That's
what
what's
works
working.
across the board, right? Is talking about it. As you mentioned, right? LGBTQ identities are being erased. And the more we can give light and space to those folks and say, we love you, we care about you. I'm sorry society's an asshole. Ooh, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on here either. But at the end of the day, these peer educator programs are really an amazing example
Absolutely. Like
of
the
something that does work.
Trevor Project, life-saving
Yes.
resources, that is an amazing group
It
helping
absolutely
those kids just understanding, and they're not alone. And that's the thing. You're not alone.
you're not
That's
alone,
one
yeah, and we
thing.
should we should be partnering with
Mhm.
schools, with healthcare professionals, with nurses, doctors, mental health care experts, people who can answer questions without embarrassment or shame, right? We have to do better.
Yeah.
I've always said, I've been saying for the last 10 years, one of my things I'd love to do as I don't know, one of my life's achievements, if you will, would be to
Mhm.
write a curriculum for sex ed in public schools
That would be
that
amazing.
focused on the biology, the what to do, what not to do, sort of more of this is how it works, this is how this system is used. These are some of the things that can happen, right? You can get an STD or you could get pregnant or whatever the case may be. But just partnering with healthcare professionals and maybe that's part of it. Maybe we were in the wrong all along for expecting school teachers to talk about a subject that we weren't even really comfortable talking about at home.
Yeah.
So, but that is no excuse for failure moving forward, and that's where I would love to write something like that curriculum so that teachers do have something that's really age appropriate and something that they are comfortable, answering questions without shame or embarrassment. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would be totally on board for that, and as a
We should
nurse,
add that to our list of things
ye
we're doing in our
we
spare
gotta
time.
put that on our bucket list of things that we're gonna be doing this year,
Perfect.
'cause we're, like, overachievers over here.
We wanted to
As a
both be
nurse,
senators, it's fine, okay? You don't grow up wanting to be a senator and not be an overachiever, right?
there's still time, we're still time, I mean, we still have plenty of time to do that. As a nurse, I would be more than happy to walk into, a school and teach, sex ed, like you said, like nurses, physicians, mental health. Like, maybe it's easier for us because I'm not gonna be like, "My god, can I don't wanna say this word." And,
I
normalizing curiosity is a thing that we need to do. If your child comes to you and asks you a question, we can't be all like, "Oh my gosh." We can't be gasping, we can't shut it down, we just
no.
need to answer it. We it doesn't have to be in detail or in graphic detail, but, I mean,
I mean, honestly, some of the funniest things that kids ask are really the best reminders that their curiosity is so normal, right? Like, when I was an early fertility nurse, I was really surprised at patients. We would do their embryo transfer and then they would get up and I'd say, okay, you can go use the restroom now, because we have folks fill their bladder up so that we can better and more easily, the embryo transfer is just, we'll just leave it at that. It's easier. The bladder's full. So afterwards, most patients who do an embryo transfer are like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to go to the bathroom. And so many of them would say, am I going to pee my embryo out? And I was like, what?
yeah,
Right? So,
totally
but
different area,
yeah,
different hole.
exactly. But like, yeah, with kids, for sure, the funniest things that they ask is just remembering how normal curiosity is, right?
Just being calm about it, that's the thing is, like, being calm about it. I remember as a kid, okay, again, dating myself, but we didn't have the internet back then, that long ago, but I did have
No
encyclopedias.
internet means no receipts, Anne-Marie.
That is true, I'm so glad I grew up then. Believe me, there are many stories. My mother listens to this
For which you
podcast.
are quite happy that there are no receipts.
My mother listened to this podcast, so I can't reveal all of my secrets of
Fair, fair,
what
fair.
happened when I was
Don't.
younger. But, I had encyclopedias and dictionary, and I remember hearing the word orgasm. I had no idea what it was. I did not understand. I didn't know what it was, and I had to go look it up, because I wasn't gonna go talk to anybody about that question. You want me to go to a nun and ask that question? I don't think so.
What? Isn't that how they teach courage in Catholic schools? It's like, you gotta go ask the nun.
Yeah. So, it was I had to learn about it through that way, and I was like, "How do I spell it?" And I remember thinking, "Organism?" And, but then finding out what it was, and I still didn't really understand it, but, it's like things like that where I had to, like, kinda navigate myself, and I didn't know what a BJ was. These are just things that's what that is, but when kids were talking about it, I would have to pretend like I knew what they were talking about because I was
Wouldn't it
embarrassed.
just be yeah, it would just be so much better. So let's wrap with this,
Yeah.
okay?
The
Silence breeds shame, y'all.
Mhm.
Silence breeds shame. Shame absolutely breeds harm. And I would be go out on a limb and say that comprehensive sex ed saves lives.
Absolutely. And I would say our ask this week to our dear listeners is think about your own sex ed experience. Like, what did you wish you had learned?
Yeah. And check your state's policies too. Find out if you have kids, you're listening to this, and you have kids, find out what kids in your community are or aren't being taught.
Yeah. And if you're a parent, aunt, uncle, mentor, whatever, be ready to ask kids, answer kids' questions with honesty and not with shame and not with like, oh my God, we don't talk about that.
Exactly. Because if we don't teach them, TikTok will.
Well, they
And I've
will.
watched some stuff on TikTok, and that's a gamble I just think none of us should probably be willing to take.
Or in my case, the encyclopedia will.
Yes. TikTok, no. Also, no to Encyclopedia. Thank you,
World
Encyclopedia
Book
Britannica.
Encyclopedia.
Yes.
All right. All right. All right. So next week, we're going to pull back the curtain on fertility clinics. What really goes on in a fertility clinic? Why are some patients returning to what is called restorative reproductive medicine or RRM? That's a big topic that's happening right now and people are talking about it particularly in the administration. And how do we separate evidence-based care from the snake oil salesman?
Yes. Trust us, you are not going to want to miss that. Not going to
Yeah.
want to miss it.
Nope. See you next week on the Repro Files.
See you then. Thanks, guys.